the techno-communism conversation. I think we're still live. Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I am going to describe relatively briefly two works that I slogged through pretty recently. One which inspired me a lot, and one which I should not have wasted time on. And I'll start off first with the waste of time, which was a conversation in video form with a more techno-fascistic-minded AI professional, although they don't present as such, and they're not, unfortunately, perceived as such. Joscha Bach, a German. I am going to talk about how systems thinking, without a focus on a humane and sustainable economic system, is an absurdity and a recipe for disaster. Technological advancements of the kind that we are undergoing today, and accelerating advanced computing takeoff, this so-called AI singularity, will reshape our world significantly in short order. And amidst the predictions and excitement and sham techno-utopian visions of people like Joscha Bach or Kurzweil or so many others, a crucial question remains: who benefits from this revolution? The automation of a sector such as advanced computing, such as the existence of AI agents of great strength, is not substantially different from high degrees of automation or full automation in other sectors in decades past, a point conveniently omitted by almost all of these people. So we've seen high automation in so many sectors, including near full automation in the manufacture of many of the components that are required for such things. Or I've given the example of farming as being a high automation sector where the workers were squeezed out and disenfranchised. The descendants of field hands and small farmers are not today independently wealthy. In fact, the opposite thing occurred. Not only was this sector automated to the benefit of wealthy individuals, but in the years there and shortly to follow, the safety net was stripped away. So not only were these people and their descendants have their jobs taken away, but they have no means to live because there are not these basics for a functioning society, namely a housing authority guaranteeing housing to all, a job guarantee, and similar type situations there, a public health service, the basic necessaries of a productive society, which the United States does not emphasize because it is a kleptocracy. The kind of thing that techno-fascists, kind of Nazis like Joscha Bach and Ray Kurzweil are pretty comfortable with. So this, the general techno-utopian Western ideal, as presented, is really little more than a lot of technobabble in service to a retreading of trickle-down economics. One of the many lies and subterfuges and stratagems that have allowed the ruling elites to construct this system that I described, wherein resources are siphoned away from working people, not just on this continent, but from every continent, and and systems unsustainable, cruel, and elitist are propped up instead of a humane and sustainable economic system. So Joscha Bach's work was called cyber animism, and it is basically a meditation, such as it is, on this a systems thinking related set of concepts, but I want to emphasize, I've said this same thing about another person inclined to this sort of thought, Ben Goertzel. Dr. Goertzel is someone that I don't know him well. I've met him, and he's also someone who's shaped my thinking at a certain point. But I think it's fair to say that you should be warned against this kind of cyber animist thinking, because by and large, it is precisely that kind of technobabble in service to very little or fundamentally upholding elitist institutions and ideologies, rather than cutting through the bullshit and building a humane and sustainable system using this kind of idea or this kind of technology, as the case may be. Any kind of writing on systems thinking that does not emphasize mere material conditions or the needs of workers, and this is extremely commonplace, whether it's something like this so-called cyber animism or not, it's a farce. People are generally repulsed by technologists and technophiles, and I would contend that it's for precisely this reason, that they do not speak to earthbound concerns or material conditions in a way that is very sensible. These are, for the most part, not sensible people in the slightest. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you observe someone talking about a military coup that had occurred. A government leader or leadership were dethroned, so to speak, and replaced by a new government. And let's say your friend who was talking about this was describing this not in the terms of a change of administration, but in terms of a personal tiff between, say, the head of this military and, say, the head of state. That they had been lovers, and now they were angry at one another, and it had all gone sideways. Even if that were true, which it probably wasn't, even if that were true, it's a very foolish way of looking at the change of government that affects potentially however many hundreds of thousands or millions of people live in that country. And you say, what a silly thing to do. But every one of these technologists, and literally every human being in the West practically, who is influenced by capitalistic thought, liberalistic thought in the worst sense, anarchistic thought in the worst sense, which is those three things might as well be interchangeable for our purposes. These things in opposition to scientific socialism is operating on such bad fundamentals that they would see something like a military coup and imagine that it's just a personal spat between two dorks. So these systems thinkers absolutely should be held to a higher standard than your drunk Uncle Joe or just random anarchistic-minded, liberalistic-minded, capitalistic-minded people. This program is always about revolutionary cybernetic socialism. So I must again urge you to demand systems thinking conversations and systems themselves that center on liberation of human beings generally, but in order of importance of marginalized groups, and the utilization of technology as a tool for achieving a universality of basic needs being met and a more just society. And you say, well, the universality of basic needs being met, that's a global problem. You're telling me that I have to eat this entire elephant. How can I eat this entire elephant? That's such a vast job and seemingly impossible job. But I would contend, again, in the wake of such a thing as an AI takeoff, that this is a simpler job than it's ever been, and that this outcome is in fact a matter of time, matter of short time, if human beings in this world assert their rights and begin to act more intelligently. And again, you will not find technologists or technophiles who are really advocating for this. It seems to be almost perfect adherence to a list of CIA talking points. For example, some such idea would be that you, as a citizen of the United States, are allowed to imagine a technological transformation of incredible kinds, having vast implications. But you are not allowed to imagine that technological transformation changing the economic system even slightly, even just enough to say, ensure that humanity doesn't go extinct because of capitalism's climate apocalypse. Because that conversation would threaten the interests of the fascistic ruling elites. And so that sort of thing is not merely discouraged, but made nearly impossible by the effects of fascistic-controlled media and influence that we could call Project Mockingbird. And if you're not familiar with that, you should read about Project Mockingbird. I will not expand on that here today. Tech, Silicon Valley, tech, this word tech, in my view, should just be viewed as a shortened form of techno-fascism. Because these people, the Joscha Bachs and 1,000 others like him, the Ray Kurzweils, there's a few other quite like him, but there's influencers with a very similar worldview operating at that level, the Peter Thiels. They advocate for a world where technology dictates the terms of your existence, and all this will do is further entrenching the power of a class of increasingly not merely ruling elites, but techno-mage ruling elites, people with godlike abilities, not because they deserve them, not because they have even the smallest amount of the kind of responsibility that would allow them to wield that power, but because they are this more or less central beneficiaries of this AI takeoff and emerging technologies that will transform them thus. And this is a system that will continue the problem of that I alluded to, where the rest of humanity struggles to survive in the margins, are disregarded as human garbage. I ask you this: there are 1 billion people on this planet who are born, and throughout the entire course of their life, these 1 billion people are short of one of 3 essentials to life: housing, potable water, or food. And as a result, they die an unnaturally a short number of years later. Does that strike you as a world of increasing intelligence? Or does that strike you as a world of great barbarism? It is, in fact, a world of tremendous barbarism, and it's often people like this, when they talk of such things, they'll talk of chattel slavery and things like this as something not merely of the relatively recent past. Chattel slavery effectively extend well into the 20th century on this continent, but as something not even of this continent, for the most part, is the way they will describe it. They'll describe it as something of the ancient world, of antiquity, as if, and they won't always say it in so many words, but the idea is to exonerate the same class of people responsible for that chattel slavery as are responsible for this set of problems of today, techno-fascists and the problems of elitism in the 20th and 21st century world generally. And I say all of this about chattel slavery to point out that there are not merely wage slaves, not the roughly 60% of people in the United States working in service industries or not paid enough to live and required to work more hours than their hunter-gatherer or feudal serf ancestors ever worked, but actual slaves. There are some hundreds of millions, by some estimates, of actual slaves, just as there are a billion people. There are hundreds of millions of actual slaves in this world. I ask you again, is that a world of intelligence? That is a world that these techno-fascists and the ruling elites generally have created and will continue to sustain. That is not a world of intelligence. And this does come down to these bad fundamentals. These people are not all sneering villains believing themselves to be evil. Many of them want to do good things. But if you are operating from bad fundamentals, you are incapable of doing good things. Just like my friend who remarks about the personal relationship between the military dictator and the head of state that he overthrew, has no understanding of the implications of a military coup. This same brain fart describes almost everyone's thinking on almost every subject. So much so that people are incapable of protecting their class interests. They're incapable of collectivizing. They're unwilling to do those things. They do not have a coherent or worldview in the slightest, for the most part. So we must resist these kind of people. This essay on cyber-animism by Joscha Bach, if you're particularly interested in certain aspects of this that could be of interest to the cybernetic socialist, I might recommend some of this, but I really don't ever recommend any work to anyone who's not a scientific socialist. You need to study scientific socialism, and I really don't ever intend to endorse the work of any person who is not a scientific socialist. So I would not really ever recommend the works of any tech person under any circumstance, and that's certainly true for Mr. Bach, despite whatever his talents in this world may be. And again, if it's clouded, if his work is steered off course, if his thoughts are obscured by these bad fundamentals that I've described, who cares how intelligent he is or how intelligent he believes himself to be? His work will be ultimately counterproductive and counter-revolutionary. I'm going to switch gears now to, in a moment, to the other piece that I wanted to discuss. But first, we have to, again, take a staunch position against this techno-fascist agenda, and that requires human dignity as measured by material conditions as a central premise. Technological advancements must be evaluated based on their contribution to human well-being and flourishing and sustainability and humanity generally. And that is why on this show I talk quite a lot about this concept of the agentariat, or an AI agentic class that could emerge from earlier conceptions of the proletariat in the wake of things like LLM models that have that level of agency, which are described in mainstream media on a daily basis. I saw 3 headlines just today remarking that Meta, Facebook Corporation, Meta's Llama 3 LLM, which is easily downloadable to many computers, not all of them, unfortunately, but many computers, will change this digital assistant game. And I think that it must be changed in such a way that I've described, which is organizers building an interoperating network of LLMs that are able to collaborate with this agentic quality with human oversight to undertake projects that could not otherwise be undertaken, namely those that advance the building of a humane and sustainable economic system, and thusly a world that does not die. So human dignity, it's not even possible to talk about this without the provision of basic necessaries in all corners of the world. And again, that is not something outside of the purview of persons in North America in this framework, because, as I said, to this AI agentic class, this kind of AI-driven collaboration, I've said it on many shows, could in very short order become the essential superstructure of our world. That is to say, it does the jobs of governments and other institutions, and renders them irrelevant. The democratic, essentially representative, that is, control of such technology, that is seen to some degree. It's knowing what you know about these kinds of people. Perhaps you didn't know it before, but you know it now. It's a little surprising that these open source LLM models are available at all. But in the spirit of that, we must reject these techno-fascists, this technological ruling elite, controlling advanced computing and emerging technology. Technological development and deployment should be subject to full representative oversight and public participation. And as I said, this agentariat concept, this concept of AI-run institutions, which in principle would require very little of users. It's basically describing a click-through process. You download a modified LLM model that has this level of agency. You put it on your computer. It's arranged in such a way that it begins working with the other agents, and the human beings who are in a part of this, whether they have the LLMs on their computer or not, are receiving emails, a series of perhaps just yes or no questions throughout the course of the day or week that they would respond to, operating as a steering committee for this somewhat sizable project, depending on the number of users. This is essentially something that a person could do when they are asleep. The running of the LLMs could be done while they are asleep, and the relatively small labor required could be done while a person is half asleep. So this need for a focus on human AI collaboration of this kind, or of kinds operating in the spirit of this, must be seen as a tool to augment human capabilities and better our world, and not replace human beings and continue the trend that capitalists want you to forget, where so many sectors are automated, but life somehow gets worse. And we must envision a future where humans and these AI agents, advanced computing generally, are all serving to solve complex problems and make this world a better place. I have more that I would say on this subject, but I don't want to go too long, because I was also going to talk a little bit about a book that I read, which I will share a link because I found it quite inspiring. And this is a full audiobook link that I will share. So this is some hours of your time, more than the Joscha Bach work, which I would not recommend that you waste your time at all with, but I would recommend that you look at this work by Ignacio Barro. I'm going to contextualize this work in the context of, again, revolutionary cybernetic socialism. Achieving the kind of transformation that I've described requires a critical reevaluation of not simply dominant mind frames and institutions, but also of revolutionary praxis, particularly the interplay of between reason, force, and resources in this increasingly technology-oriented world. So this conversation delves into some of these complexities, drawing inspiration from this work of Ignacio Barro, which I would highly recommend that you look at the link and listen to this full book as you are able. The next time you're tempted to listen to some garbage podcast or some bad music, put this on and listen to it for an hour here or there. It's certainly worth your time. And I think that it will inform even things like building this AI agentic class or agentariat, even though this work was written before this AI takeoff had really been conceived of. And so we can, again, to reiterate, a globally networked collective of agentic intelligence empowered by modifiable AI models. And that is, I think, one of the most important concepts in human history. And certainly we can say that advanced computing generally and its capacities at this time and in years to follow could have a transformative effect on our world, at least as significant as, say, the way that telephony changed the world in the late 19th and early 20th century, or the way that electrification changed the world in that time and shortly after, if not beyond that. So we can argue that Barro's insights on the limitations of the reason of force and the uneven distribution of universal resources are crucial considerations for any revolutionary movement, but particularly in this age of the possibility of revolutionary cybernetic socialism. And I think it's important to emphasize the revolution, the possibility of that revolution there, because as things stand, we are moving toward a techno-fascist revolution, and we're all sleepwalking toward that outcome, allowing techno-fascists to consolidate the surveillance state, working with people like Joe Biden, who just passed further draconian measures along these lines within the last 48 hours. This is a monthly occurrence that your freedoms are limited, and you're not seeing benefits from this sort of thing. You're only seeing harms, and that's going to continue. So someone like Ray Kurzweil, who says that all of this is serving a different kind of endgame, a utopian outcome, he is a liar. I think it's fair to look at Ray Kurzweil as a hard science fiction writer with a fascistic strain in his work. Someone like Daniel Defoe in his work Robinson Crusoe. When that book was published, people did not know that there was a person named Daniel Defoe who published it. They thought that it was the true story of the life of Robinson Crusoe, and they thought that for many decades to follow. And that's how Ray Kurzweil's fiction, hard sci-fi, fascist musings are presented as reality when they are, of course, really not, in my opinion. This agentariat, as described, does represent, I think, a truly revolutionary concept that leverages the power of advanced computing to empower the working class and all humankind. Those are basically this can be used interchangeably if you truly understand those concepts. Individuals would utilize specially tailored large language models to collaborate on, at first a small scale, but very soon a massive scale, tackling challenges then that would be insurmountable for isolated groups. And again, this could be done on this click and connect or click through model where actual labor is very, very limited on the part of any individual user, but nevertheless, work that could not be done by the highest order of professionals could be achieved. This astonishing form of collective intelligence will serve as a powerful tool for resource redistribution, research, and hopefully very soon dismantling oppressive systems, because we have 5 years, less than 5 years, to end certain particular sectors, namely the military-industrial complex. The U.S. military-industrial complex is the world's worst polluter, a $1 trillion abomination. But we must end the fossil fuel sectors and the livestock system. These are the top 3 polluters and contributors to the death of this species. And if we do not change this set of systems within 5 years, we will have reached runaway overheating, wherein the prospects of human survival will be very low, and it will be a near certainty that, if not all of humanity, many billions of humans will die. In Iran, last summer, it's getting to be that time of year again, temperatures were recorded of about 160 degrees. That is a temperature where human beings cannot survive. That is what the whole world will become. It will be an unraveling of the ecosystems and of the human society in the wake of this. And this will be, again, the deaths of many billions. And the ruling elites who quite intentionally contrive to see this outcome will be the only ones, the very devils who cause this situation, not historically, but today, will be the only ones with the resources to survive this set of conundrums. So that is effectively no different from the colonial evils of the past. For example, a man named Christopher Columbus, when he first landed on one island in the Caribbean, he enslaved all of the people living on that island and worked them all to death. Their society was completely destroyed, and they were basically all killed. Some small number of people of that island may have merely dispersed, but they were basically all worked to death. And you say, my God, how could such a thing happen? Even though then it became common practice as the Catholic Church and other institutions embraced this model. This is no different from this world where billions die for the systems upholding the ruling elites, these ecocidal systems. It's no different, because the essential issue there, those ruling elites, the people, those few 100,000 people perhaps with the resources to survive in that scenario, will be predominantly of European descent. Almost all of the people, again, depending on the number who die, it will be heavily skewed toward people in the global south. So darker-skinned people will be dying for the sins of lighter-skinned people. So we do not have any luxuries in time or mincing words or reform. And so we have to build something of the strength of the agentariat with the express purpose of dismantling these fascistic systems. And its effectiveness hinges on a nuanced understanding, I believe, of revolution. I'll return to Barrow's idea. Barrow observed that the force of reason is of little value when confronting the reason of force. And I'll call back these techno-file sophists, these liars, and they're seemingly rational. musings on change and the world around them, they exercise a false force of reason, but we have to build that reason of force, the one thing strong enough to end ecocidal fascism, which in my view is building these mechanisms of this AI agentic class. And so the limitations of persuasion generally, though, are spoken of here in the face of entrenched power, but we need to build the greater power there, which would be this thing that I've described in earlier shows in terms of a United Earth Directorate. The evolution of something like an agentariat ultimately into that superstructure. And we must necessarily then dismantle without mercy existing hierarchies and the ideologies that uphold them. The uneven distribution of resources is a challenge for revolutionaries. Just in recent weeks, this fascistic Biden administration, no different from any of the worst fascists in history, no different from other Americans, be they so-called Democratic or Republican, they are all ecocidal fascists. Just in recent weeks, this administration has dismantled a program that was providing high-speed internet and some data services to low-income people. It was a service that was put up at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak. And the coronavirus outbreak, of course, is still ongoing, but there's the pretense that it is not. And so services are cut. Of course, no services should be cut under any circumstance, but that is the neoliberal mandate of, which is a far-right mandate of these fascists, is to cut services. But this is of interest to the technologists because in this moment, when LLM models, for example, could be used to this end, they decide to cut data to the very people who could begin to do real work there, rendering some of those efforts on the part of the people who should be doing this less possible. And that is the general function of this neoliberalism, is to weaken working people, so much so that not only are they unable to protect their class interests, but they do not even have a conception of what class interests are. They're just talking about American football, or just utter nonsense unrelated to their dying planet, or their the true concerns of the real world. This need for global solidarity and being outspoken, the best thing that you can do in this world, aside from building this kind of network that I've described, is to be someone who is willing to speak to others about things like this human-centered AI takeoff in defiance of these elitist institutions. Not enough people understand these concepts. They need to be told what scientific socialism is and why it's in their interests to become communists. Our future is not predetermined. We may well be looking at this world of techno-fascism, but a work like Ignacio Barros serves as a potent reminder that a successful revolution demands a clear-eyed understanding of both reason and the forces of power, coupled with a strategic approach to resource allocation. And I believe that this AI agentic class that I talk about a lot on this podcast, the agentariat, powered by advanced computing and this new prospect of collective intelligence presents a transformative tool for a 21st century revolution. By fostering this kind of global cooperation, we can ensure equitable resource distribution, harness the power of a truly unifying and empowering narrative, and we can turn the promise of revolutionary cybernetic socialism in your lifetime into a reality. So I ask you again to take action, to talk to people about these important ideas. Let us join hands and forge a path toward a world where technology serves humanity and does not cause the destruction of our world and the extinction of our species.